I hope I'm not the only one who is strangely obsessed with political protest music. I love the way they are able to condense powerful messages into catchy sentences. They also tend to be songs born out of passion rather than out of a lust for fame and money, which tends to make music feel more down to earth. In my view, they also have an unmatched capability of painting a picture and telling a story. Sometimes it can feel like you're listening to an audiobook rather than a song due to it being so lasered in on the message it's attempting to convey or the story it's trying to tell. The first song I wanted to start with is a song called Which Side Are You On? The song was written in 1931 by a woman named Florence Reese. She was a wife of a man named Sam Reese, who was a union organizer for the United Mine Workers in Harlan County. This was penned during a labor struggle which is known as the Harlan County War, or Bloody Harlan, which resulted in the death of 13 laborers and 5 guards. The sheriff named J.H. Blair, who was hired by the mining company, illegally entered the home of Reese in order to find him. Reese had been warned ahead of time, so he wasn't home. His wife Florence was home with their kids, though. After the men left their home, Florence started to write the words of this song on a calendar in their kitchen. Her frustration is absolutely palpable. She is practically begging the non-aligned men to pick a side, hearkening the same question: which side are you on?
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The framing is brilliant because it establishes that there are only two choices: standing with the workers or standing with the bosses.
They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair.
It's truly sad to learn how unions were neutered throughout the history of the United States in order to prevent any massive disruptions. The labor unions may have won some battles, but the bosses have won the war, in large part due to its support from the local, state, and federal government. All You Fascists Bound to Lose is such a fascinating song to me. The intro to it explains exactly why it's so intriguing.
Put it there, boy, and we'll show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do.
This song was written during World War II, so obviously the environment was different than what it is now. The main enemies of the United States at that time were Japan and Germany. Due to this, we had joined together with the Soviet Union to fight fascism. Hearing someone openly identify as a hillbilly to then follow it up with an anti-fascist comment is something that would be damn near impossible to find these days. It's just interesting because most modern redneck or hillbillies that I know of think Antifa is a boogeyman. Then one day you stumble upon one of the OG hillbillies, and he is proudly declaring that fascism will always lose against the will of the people. He also does say one of the most metal lines I've ever heard in a folk song.
There's people of every nation marching side by side, marching across the fields where a million fascists died. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose.
I'm Not Marching Anymore is a brilliant story written by Phil Oakes that takes the listener through various wars the United States has fought through, referencing the War of 1812, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Mexican-American War, the Civil War, the World Wars, etc. With every war he names, he exclaims, "I ain't marching anymore."
But I ain't marching anymore.
He then asks a question that I remember hit me very deeply when I first heard it.
Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all?
He also levies a critique towards the American labor leaders who complain when a missile plant is closed. These songs tend to focus solely on the government, so it's very interesting to see labor leaders criticized for upholding the military-industrial complex.
Now the labor leaders screaming when they close a missile plant. United Fruit screams at the Cuban shore.
And finally, he ends the song with an absolute amazing line.
Call it peace or call it treason, call it love or call it reason, but I ain't marching anymore.
He also has a song called The Power and the Glory, which reminds me of the song This Land Is Your Land, which comes off as a very romantic song about America, but then it goes deeper into social and political critiques as it goes on. The Preacher and the Slave has deep historical roots. For you to understand this song, you first must understand what the Salvation Army is. In the modern day, they mainly stand outside grocery stores with a bell at Christmas, collecting change to be used for charitable purposes. Originally, though, they were mainly hired by factories to play songs during strikes. This was with the hopes of drowning out the voices of the protesters and strikers, while also boosting the morale among the scab workers with religious music. Labor leaders would be shouting for better pay or safer working conditions, to only have the song In the Sweet By and By overtake their demands.
In the sweet by and by.
So the people adapted to this new environment. They would make their own lyrics to the songs played by the Salvation Army and distribute the words to their people. Then when the Salvation Army begins to play a song about how lovely heaven is, the protesters would have their version ready to go about the struggles of the working class. This particular song was written by a fella named Joe Hill in 1911, a Swedish-American man who was a strong proponent of labor movements. This has allowed him to achieve a legendary status among certain circles within American culture.
When you ask how about something to eat, they will answer with voices so sweet. You will eat by and by in that glorious land in the sky. Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die.
Jesus Christ is a song by Woody Guthrie that has some emotional power. I'm not religious myself, but hearing the story of Jesus told through Woody's framing is a brilliant piece of art, forcing the listener to consider things that they'd never had before. For example, have you ever wondered what would happen if Jesus lived in America? Everyone would love him and worship him, right?
This song was made in New York City of rich mans and preachers and slaves. If Jesus was to preach like he preached in Galilee, they would lay Jesus Christ in his grave.
I believe this song is extremely simple but effective. It puts the crosshairs on those who are powerful, the military, police, landowners, and government, and it explains how those institutions still exist and would exercise the exact same force they had before. You may have caught on to the fact that all of these songs are pretty old. Well, let's try focusing on some modern protest music. Growing up, I listened to a lot of rap, and usually the topics covered by those types of songs are more about police brutality or racism. One of my favorite rap songs that kind of aligns with the topic of this video is Killer Mike's Reagan. It's an amazing examination into modern American culture and politics. It even critiques American democracy from a pretty left-wing perspective, explaining that we are bound to forever have to settle for little changes rather than making a big change. He even touches on the topic of labor alienation and how much rap is used to distract people from their own starvation. This song also gives my favorite explanation of the war on drugs and how it resulted in racist police brutality. I mean, come on. He even explains how the United States still uses slavery for profit in prison systems, citing the literal Constitution.
Prison turned to profits, cause free labor's the cornerstone of U.S. economics. Cause slavery was abolished unless you are in prison. You think I ambush it and then read the 13th Amendment. Involuntary servitude and slavery it prohibits. That's why they giving drug offenders time and double ditch.
When I heard a rap song quote the Constitution as a history nerd, I began jumping with joy. It's an amazingly critical song, and it's probably my favorite rap song that falls into this category of protest music. The Ministry of Oil is a song written around 2004 in the climate of the American Middle Eastern wars. It was made by a duo named the Prince Michigans. It's a scathing critique of the rhetoric and the sanitized language often employed by the media when covering American wars. Easily one of the most powerful modern anti-war songs. When you know the full extent of the plundering the United States did in the Middle East, the song really hits deep.
While the U.S. Army played police, how much do you suppose that artwork sold for? As their last remaining food began to spoil.
Jesse Wells is a folk musician who covers various political topics. Basically, imagine if the newspaper had a raspy voice and could play the guitar. Now imagine that newspaper in the middle of the woods in some place in Arkansas. That's pretty much Jesse Wells. I personally like him because he is truly the closest we have in the modern day to something like Pete Seeger or Woody Guthrie. I know, before you get mad, it's not fair to compare Jesse to such established legends, especially this early in his career. That's true, but I just don't know who else to really compare him to. He's kind of in a league of his own for the time being. He critiques American foreign policy and the government mainly from a populist perspective. His most famous song is probably War Isn't Murder. One of my personal favorite songs is Sometimes You Bomb Iran.
Government contractors salivating, there's real good money and a liberation. Same playbook as 2003. Looks familiar to you, looks familiar to me. Sometimes you get at your B2s and go bomb Iran.
In fact, I might dedicate a future video specifically to Jesse Wells songs, because there are too many to mention in this video. For this though, I will focus on a short song called Homeownin'.
You will never own a home. You will rent until you die.
Which which most young Americans can probably relate to in some facet. It's an observational song discussing how home ownership has become so unaffordable that it is simply no longer an option, resulting in what he calls family feudalism, where your only hope to have a home is through inheritance.
It's an old game, buy your own prison. Hip hip hooray for family feudalism.
It may sound silly, but calling the inheritance of property family feudalism is a brilliant framing to me. It kind of puts a mirror to the listener and asks the question, are you really that different from the past? Have you really progressed as much as you read in those books?